Most people saw Cristiano Ronaldo leaving the World Cup in tears and thought they were watching the end of a career. But as a psychiatrist, I saw something else entirely. I saw a high-functioning human mind navigating the most dangerous psychological territory there is, the end of an era. We all face moments like this. Maybe it's not a World Cup exit, maybe it's a job loss, a breakup, or simply realizing that you aren't the person you used to be 10 years ago. When the world starts shouting that you're done, your brain begins to manufacture lies. In psychiatry, we call these cognitive distortions. Today, we aren't just talking about football, we are going to deconstruct the legend mindset to see how Ronaldo ignores the global buzz, channels toxic criticism into positive fuel, and most importantly, how you can use these exact same psychiatric tools to reframe your own failures into a new kind of power. Let's simplify the science of winning when everyone else says you've lost.
Okay, so let's really dive into this. What exactly happens in your brain when the whistle blows on a major chapter of your life? When we go through a massive setback, society usually frames our emotional crash as some kind of personal weakness, right? People just tell us to tough it out. But the medical reality is completely different. That intense emotional pain, the heavy confusion, that sudden absolute drop in your motivation, that is not weakness. It's a hardcore biological reality. Your nervous system is reacting to a massive shift in your environment. You're literally going through a documented physiological transition.
In fact, psychiatry recognizes this transition explicitly. The DSM-5 literally defines this as an adjustment disorder. It's the development of emotional or behavioral symptoms in response to an identifiable stressor. And I want you to notice that second part, marked distress that feels completely out of proportion. Look, when bad things happen, getting upset is normal. But when your reality fundamentally shifts, say you get fired out of nowhere or face a sudden divorce, the distress can absolutely overwhelm your normal day-to-day functioning. Understanding this grounds your emotional experience in objective science. Your brain's intense reaction to change isn't you losing your grip. It's a clinically documented response.
And the social readjustment reading scale brilliantly illustrates just how sensitive we are to change. It measures the stress strength of different life events by assigning them life change units. So to put that into perspective, the death of a close family member is a 63. Getting fired from your job? That's a 47. But here is the wild part. Notice the data point at the very bottom. Outstanding personal achievement is a 29. Yes, you heard that right. A major promotion or a massive success still causes significant biological stress. Why? Because any change forces us to adapt and cope in completely new ways. Your brain literally has to rewire its expectations of the world, whether the event is negative or positive.
Now, when that forced adaptation is triggered by a perceived failure, things get really tricky. The noise we hear after a setback is often heavily filtered. Dr. Aaron Beck, who's a pioneer in cognitive therapy, identified something called the cognitive triad. Basically, when people are distressed or depressed, they do not see reality clearly. Instead, they view three things through a really toxic negative lens: themselves, the outside world, and the future. They see themselves as losers, they see the world as hostile, and they believe the future is completely hopeless. This is the external buzz and the critics taking up residence inside your own head, and your brain tragically misinterprets this noise as objective truth. This toxic lens builds into what we call a cognitive distortion. A distorted thought takes a setback and applies magnification. It's like you drop a single stitch in a sweater you're knitting and suddenly you want to throw the whole thing in the trash. You lose a job and your brain screams, "My life is permanently ruined." That's the brain manufacturing lies. It totally magnifies the negatives and completely minimizes all of your past successes. It causes a total breakdown in realistic self-perception. You aren't dealing with facts anymore, you're trapped in a distorted house of mirrors. But there is one specific distortion, one massive thinking error that even top-tier athletes like Ronaldo struggle with when they face failure on a global stage. It's the all-or-nothing trap. The idea that if I'm not the absolute best, then I am absolutely nothing. It derails us more than anything else. So how do we dismantle it? I'll show you exactly how we use a psychiatric blueprint to completely rewire this response in just a moment. The answer is grounded right here in cognitive behavior therapy. The core idea is that generating alternative explanations for events is a powerful way to undermine those inaccurate, distorted, automatic thoughts. You have to start treating criticism and even your own perceived failures as just data rather than your definition. When the critics yell or your internal voice says you're finished, you don't just blindly accept it, you generate an alternative explanation. You can even start an evidence journal. You actively look at the objective evidence for and against that toxic statement.
To do this actively, we use an amazing tool from Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, or REBT. It's called the disputing technique. Think of it as a 3-step exercise to actively channel negative emotions into positive fuel. Step 1, identify the negative activating event. Ask yourself, what actually happened? Step 2, recognize the dysfunctional belief or cognitive distortion. What is the specific law your brain is telling you about that event? And step 3, dispute the belief. You interrogate it like a ruthless lawyer, reformulating it into a realistic, actually helpful thought. Let's see this in action. Think about a classic dysfunctional belief. I must be a failure. That thought lives purely in the emotional distress center of your brain, the amygdala. But through cognitive restructuring, we challenge it with our legend status, our past wins. We reformulate it sensibly to, I had a setback, but my past wins prove my capability. By actually writing this down and forcing this sensible reformulation, you are physically moving your brain's processing from pure emotional panic into logical, evidence-based thinking in the prefrontal cortex. It's a total vibe shift. You are taking back control of the narrative. When you do this consistently, you build something absolutely incredible. You build what psychologist Albert Bandura defined as self-efficacy. I like to think of self-efficacy as a deeply ingrained vibe of intense self-belief. It's your internal expectation and rock-solid confidence that no matter what crazy environment you are placed in, you can successfully execute the behaviors needed to cope and succeed. Even when they're benched or fiercely criticized, a high self-efficacy individual maintains their inner momentum. It is a measurable psychological engine for bouncing back. So how do we actively build this resilience? Well, Bandura proved we can actually rewrite our brain's expectations. He ran this famous and honestly slightly terrifying experiment using a live boa constrictor. He took people with a debilitating fear of snakes. First, they just watched a therapist safely handle the snake. That's participant modeling. Then, they approached and handled the snake themselves in gradual baby steps. And you know what? Their self-efficacy totally skyrocketed. We can do the exact same thing in our lives. We face our fears in steps. We practice cognitive rehearsal, which means mentally visualizing ourselves succeeding. We use positive self-talk, and we constantly dispute our own faulty belief systems. Which brings us to a beautiful, defining concept by Carl Rogers called the self-actualizing tendency. This is our innate human drive to fulfill our absolute highest potential. When you build up your self-efficacy, you are fiercely fueling this tendency. You achieve what we call identity consolidation. You learn to integrate all your past successes, all your hard work, into your current identity. And because of this, a single failure, a single messy exit from a job or relationship literally cannot destroy you. A legend isn't defined by their last game, but by the totality of their impact and their relentless striving for growth.
And honestly, that is the main thing I want you to take away from this explainer today. Resilience is not some genetic gift reserved for a lucky few. It is an active, deliberate choice to override your brain's distortions. True greatness, whether you are a legendary athlete, a parent, or a professional navigating a really tough career pivot, comes from refusing to let the world's noise or your own brain's temporary lies become your permanent reality. You have that exact same choice. You now have the psychiatric blueprint to dismantle the noise and reframe your setbacks. So, I've got a question for you. What is one cognitive distortion or piece of unfair criticism that you are going to dispute and turn into fuel this week? Let's discuss it down in the comments. Keep restructuring those thoughts.